welcome back. So in this video I want to talk with you about calcium deficiency on orchids, and more exactly I want to show to you my experience and hopefully you will learn something from it. So for many years some of the leaves on my new growth on my cattleyas turn black and fall off, and some of the newly emerging growths themselves turned black and died before even producing a leaf. I got very frustrated because my regular disease control program failed to solve the problem. I started to use different chemical control programs, all of which also failed to stop that supposedly rot. And I started to dig more and more into the matter, and I found out that my problem is more likely to be physiological and not pathological. I found out that the most likely cause of it was a deficiency of calcium. Among other things, calcium is essential for cell division and cell wall production. So, if calcium deficiency was going to occur almost invariably, it will be in the rapidly dividing tissue, just as occurs in newly emerging growth or in the new leaves. The mature bulbs and leaves may have adequate calcium and be in perfect condition. However, unlike some other essential elements, calcium is immobile and cannot be translocated from older growths into the new growths to compensate for any deficiency. Once calcium is deposited in the cell wall, it stays there. Calcium must therefore be available whenever any part of the plant is in active growth or a deficiency will occur in those parts. So now I want to talk with you about the symptoms of calcium deficiency. Calcium deficiency is the most common mineral deficiency of orchids, yet my experience is that it is mostly overlooked even by experienced growers. The symptoms of calcium deficiency are most commonly seen in cattleyas and less so in Paphiopedilums, sometimes in other genera, and generally occur during periods of rapid growth in spring and summer. I will concentrate in this video on the effects in cattleyas because here is where I have seen it the most, but the principles apply to other commonly known genera. Some cattleyas clones are highly susceptible and repeatedly affected. All or almost all of the newly emerging leaves may simultaneously turn black. Other clones never show any visible symptoms. The first sign of the problem generally starts with a blackening of the newly emerging leaf or flower sheath. In its early stages, the lesion is quite soft and watery. It progresses from the tip towards the leaf base and may be preceded by a yellow halo. Both the flower sheath and the adjacent leaf are often both affected. The entire leaf may turn black and drop off. Often, the outer flower sheath will be totally black, but the inner sheath will be unaffected. This is a sure sign that the cause of the problem is physiological and not pathological, because any fungus or bacteria would have no respect for your longed-for flowers. Once the leaf falls off, the pseudobulb is left standing and uninfected, but unable to contribute to the growth of the plant. The blackening of the leaf may start back from the tip, particularly where the halves of the expanded leaf remain stuck together, and may occur as a similar type of lesion on both halves of the leaf. In some cases, the entire newly emerging growth turns black and dies, but the parent pseudobulb remains unaffected. This is quite different to the situation caused by fungal or bacterial infections. In these cases, the infection, if left untreated, will continue to spread from the leaf into the pseudobulb or adjacent pseudobulbs and will eventually progress into the rhizome and kill the plant. Where the deficiency is not as acute, the new pseudobulb may not turn blackened, but may be quite stunted compared with the previous pseudobulbs. Now let's talk about what causes calcium deficiency. So, the real cause is rapid plant growth in the absence of adequate calcium ions. What are the factors that promote rapid growth? Well, those are warm, sunny, moist and humid conditions as occur in spring and summer, and quite a lot of supply of the essential nutrients. Unfortunately, most commercial fertilizers do not contain any calcium. Heavy fertilizations programs designed to encourage rapid growth are therefore more likely to produce symptoms of calcium deficiency than is the case where little or no fertilizer is used. Unless a conscious effort is made to supply an additional source of calcium in the fertilizer mix, most of the calcium available to the plant comes from the water. Town water does contain calcium, but the levels can be insufficient for some Cattleya clones, particularly if they are otherwise heavily fertilized. The rainwater has no calcium content. If rapid plant growth is occurring during periods when rain rather than town water is the main source of the water, calcium deficiency can and does occur. Because the weather at such times is generally hot, humid and favorable for the establishment of the pathogens, and the lesions resembles those caused by pathogens, the real cause of the problem is often overlooked. The deficiency can be treated by supplying the plant with calcium either in powder or liquid form. If the problem is confined to a few readily identifiable plants, powder limestone or even better powder dolomite, which also supplies magnesium, can be sprinkled onto the potting medium. This is best done in late winter and midsummer before the main flashes of growth occur. The Paphiopedilum growers treat the problem by incorporating shell grit or limestone chips into the potting medium. For 10 or 20 cm pot, a full teaspoon or a tablespoon, respectively, of dolomite is sufficient. Powdered gypsum, which will not alterate pH of the medium, may also be suitable, but I have had no experience in its use. I actually recently started to use a product from Cana that only contains calcium in liquid form, which I mix with my already magnesium sulfate in the same water, so I provide calcium and magnesium. In more extensive collections, or where the occurrence of calcium deficiency is more prevalent, the simplest solution is to apply calcium nitrate as a foliar spray, either alone or mixed with other foliar fertilizers. During periods of growth, weekly applications are recommended. Remember, calcium nitrate is also a readily available source of nitrogen, and you may need to adjust the overall nitrogen content of your fertilizer to compensate for the additional nitrogen supplied by the calcium nitrate. There are multiple cases of black rot of orchids, and I totally understand that you will confuse quite easily calcium deficiency with black rot, but if you learn to recognize the signs, you will be able to actually know once you see it. So now you already know that calcium is an essential nutrient required for optimal growth of your orchids. Calcium is absorbed through the roots and moved upward through the xylem via the transpiration process. It increases cell wall thickness and strength, among other things, as well as a plant resistant to fungal and bacterial disease. The plant requires calcium the most during the periods of active growth while it is building new tissue. It must be supplied to the plant in the same proportion to its growth rate. Despite using a CalMag fertilizer and other calcium supplements, black necrotic tissue may still appear on some of your leaf tips often with a yellow halo, suggesting a calcium deficiency occurred to the growing season. Just because it's black and rotting, do not mistake the signs of calcium deficiency for the fast-moving summer rot from excess leaf wetness or the deadly black rot from the water molds. The most obvious sign of deficiency is rapidly expanding tissue that becomes necrotic, such as newly forming leaf or pseudobulb. Black rot is a fast-moving disease and often starts at the base of the pseudobulb and moves upward through the plant, killing it within days. The necrotic tissue from calcium deficiency slowly continues to blacken. It is unsightly, but not fatal to the plant. If you have been supplying enough calcium to your orchids in your fertilizer program, but you are still seeing the signs of calcium deficiency, there is some other cultural issue for you to diagnose and correct. When you have a black rot issue, and if you cut into the healthy tissue and sterilize the wound correctly, the infection should stop. But if you cut the new leaf tip that turned black on a calcium deficient orchid, the black leaf tips will continue to grow even though you cut the damaged tissue away. So there are a few cultural things that may affect your orchids, and even though you supply calcium, your orchids will still have calcium deficiency. And these are root damage. Despite your best efforts to supply sufficient calcium, your plants can still suffer from deficiency if something interferes with the uptake of the critical element. Calcium is mostly absorbed through the roots, so a compromised root system can easily manifest itself in signs of calcium deficiency. Root function can be disrupted for many reasons. One of the most common causes of root damage is the repotting process itself, particularly when orchids are repotting when new roots are not actively growing. The older roots are damaged in the repotting process and the plant must send new roots to stabilize. Chewing pests like snails and roaches can eat the tender new root tips. Once damaged, the roots need to regrow before the plant will stabilize and be able to absorb water and nutrients. A waterlogged potting mix can suffocate the roots. Waterlogging does not occur as a result of overwatering per se. It occurs when there is insufficient air around the roots because the potting mix is too fine or the organic matter has degraded and compacted around the roots. Another thing that can interfere with your fertilizer program is the salt buildup around the roots. As long as the concentration of salts in the potting media is less than inside the root, water is pushed into the root by osmotic pressure, termed root pressure. Salts naturally present in your water supply or added by fertilizers can build up in the potting mix from the repeated wetting and drying cycles. Organic matter like peat and sphagnum moss tend to retain salts. Unless flushed from the pot, high salt levels can build up to unsafe levels, so that water will tend to move out of the root rather than into the root. The root damage might be obvious. Roots look stunted and may have brown markings. A sure sign of excess salts is when the roots look fine until it touches the clay pot or the top of the medium and then blackens. Calcium uptake is directly related to the transpiration rate, the process by which the most of the water absorbed by the roots is pulled upward through the vascular tissue and ultimately evaporated from the stomata openings in the leaves. Plants that are not transpiring at a high rate do not take up a large amount of calcium. One adaptation to an epiphytic orchid lifestyle is a thick cuticle with a few stomata to limit water loss. Cattleys and other orchids that open their stomata during the night have adapted to a xeric environment by keeping their stomata closed during the day, only opening at night when temperatures are a little cooler and humidity is higher, in an effort to prevent water loss. When humidity is very low, the stomata may remain closed both night and day, in which case transpiration cannot occur, severely limiting the amount of calcium that can be absorbed. If grown under too dry conditions, there may not be enough moisture taken up by the roots, or that can be robbed from adjacent cells for there to be continuous flow of water from the roots to the leaves for transpiration. A strong transpirational pool is essential for calcium uptake. Different caseous can compete for uptake. High phosphorus levels have been found to increase dieback symptoms in cattleys because excess phosphorus is antagonistic to calcium absorption by the root system. The phosphorus levels of 100 ppm used in some experiments to reduce leaf tip dieback is probably more representative of what might be expected when using bloom booster fertilizers, those with a high middle number in the fertilizer formula. As long as you are not using bloom boosters too frequently or acidifying your water with phosphoric acid, excess phosphorus levels are probably not a concern for the orchid hobbyist. To a lesser extent, potassium and some other nutrients can be antagonistic to calcium uptake, but this would not be expected to occur with most fertilizer formulations. Roots should be a uniform white when dry, with nice green root tips, and not to have stunted roots that have brown discolorations. Another thing that can interfere with your fertilizer program is unusually high temperatures. Many articles postulate that unusually high temperatures in the absence of the cooling effects of frequent watering can interfere with calcium uptakes. Several factors must therefore be present in order for dieback symptoms to occur. First, the plant must be in active growth. Active vegetative growth, especially the stage of rapid leaf expansion, which would require high light intensities, good fertilization, and warm temperatures. Second, temperatures surrounding the root system must be higher than normal. The epiphytic medium can be expected to reach temperatures comparable to the high air temperatures of a greenhouse during the summer months unless some controlled root temperature is used, such as most frequent watering. However, any cultural factor that would injure the roots and affect their capacity to absorb calcium during periods of active growth could in itself induce calcium deficiency without high root temperatures. Third, the degree of susceptibility is dependent upon the genetics of the plant. I have noted some symptoms on some of my cattleya hybrids, but some have pointed out that they have seen symptoms on Epidendrum anceps, Stanhopeia species, and some Vandas. So right guys, this has been the video for today, and I hope that now you are more cautious of what is happening in your growing room, and you can now recognize better the symptoms of calcium deficiency, and you will be able to take proper actions. As I previously mentioned, I will use the Canna product calcium. It is a mono compound, and that I will mix with the magnesium sulfate, but I won't mix them at the same time in the water. So first I will put the bucket of water, I will mix the calcium, I will store it really well, and after that I will add the magnesium sulfate and store it again, because you don't want to really add it at the same time in the water. You first need to dilute each of the compounds and then use it on your orchids. For calcium, I will use about 50 or 60 ppm, and for magnesium about 50 ppm, and with that I will fertilize once a month my orchids, and in the summertime I will also apply some foliar feed with the same concentrations. It is also very important to keep the pH to an adequate level depending on what media you are using. If, for example, I grow my orchids in semi-hydro, I will make sure I will drop the pH to 5.5, or 4.5, and because the leca tends to alterate the pH, and you will result in an alkaline medium, so you don't want that. So alright guys, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. I will be more than happy to answer them. If you have liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. Thank you very much for watching, and see you all next time. Bye!